All right, welcome to episode 67 of the At Bat Podcast presented by War Media, where we give you our thoughts on the latest Chicago baseball news, as well as take a trip around the league. I am Saul Rodriguez, joined as always by Gabriel Wilkins, who you've seen on War Media's Open Run. And we have another guy joining our show is Mike Hughes. You can follow him on the socials at The Shy Kid. He covers everything from Iowa Cubs to the Chicago Sky. So as we get into the final stretch of the baseball season, you'll be seeing him a lot more on this show. Thanks for joining, Mike.
Man, it's a blast, bro. It's a blast.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. How you doing, Gabe?
I'm doing well. It's always a pleasure, as you know, Saul, to be talking about baseball yet another week with you as well as Mike. It's just to hear his thoughts, on the state of the Cubs as well as the state of the White Sox. There's a lot going on in Chicago baseball as well as, this National League wild card race, which appears to be heating up.
Oh yeah, and it's one of those things where, with the way the Bears are going, you want to we have. See, we're lucky because we can hide behind baseball, So like you know what I'm saying. Even if the team is doing bad, look at the White Sox are doing at least some positive things, getting some guys in the front office, whatever, just whatever, however you might think of it. But they're adding guys, so at least it's positive. But yeah, we'll be talking Cubs, NL wild card, all that stuff, as well as some stuff going on with the Rays as well as the Padres. So we'll get into that in just a bit. But we'll start with the team that, is possibly, I don't know if you want to call it melting right now. Hopefully they're not, but it's just what it looks like to me right now. But the Cubs are 79 and 73. They're still, as of right now, a playoff team. They hold that third wild card spot, but just a half a game. But I mean, they've lost, a few series in a row now to the Rockies. They can't beat the Diamondbacks. Yeah, it's rough out here. But Mike, what's your kind of like what's your status on the Cubs right now? How do you feel? I mean, we had that, we're recording this on a Thursday where, coming off that Justin Steele game where the Cubs just, they started off well, had a lead for Justin Steele, but he kind of crumbled like the fourth inning. How do you feel about the Cubs right now and just the way things are going here in September?
Yeah, I mean, back-to-back bad starts by Justin Steele, and
Mm-hmm.
after 7 no-hit innings for Blake Snell the other day with the Padres, which they barely even won that game thanks to Bogart. But it's definitely a conversation to where I think the Cy Young conversation is over for Justin Steele. He's only got 2 starts available left. And to be quite honest, Blake Snell, if you look at his stats, I understand there's levels to it. Like there's definitely levels to it. Like he's doubling Steele right now in strikeouts, but Steele's also really good with his whip and a lot of other different parts to it. Strider's still in that conversation with a 3.73 ERA, which baffles my mind, but whatever. But it's definitely something right now to where that was what I took from last night is like, okay, the Cy Young conversation's over. Unfortunately, just 2 bad starts in September. It can't happen. But the team's just been piss poor pretty much all September. A really hot start to the second half of the year. I loved it. I was excited about it. Obviously, I was down in Iowa watching PCA and Canario and Merv and all these guys that I've built these relationships with. Just really become who we always knew they could be. And it's been so great seeing those guys do that. And it's really great seeing Canario finally get an opportunity after 2 weeks of just hanging out. And then last night, not getting an opportunity, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Man,
But
don't get me started on that one.
like it's
I got some thoughts on that one personally.
most definitely. And I don't want to take everything. So that's really where
Good.
I'm at with it. I'm really looking at right now more so the scheduling, and the Cubs just got. I don't know if I can swear on here, but the Cubs
No, you're
just
good.
got. The Cubs got dicked on the final schedule for the year. I mean, I'm looking at Arizona. Arizona's playing the Yankees, the Sox, the Astros, and the Astros aren't going to be playing for anything in the last series of the year. Then you got the Pirates, or not the Pirates, the Reds who are playing the Pirates, the Guardians, and the Cardinals. The Marlins are playing the Brewers, the Mets, and the Pirates. And then you have the Cubs who are playing the Milwaukee Brewers and the Atlanta Braves, and then the Rockies again, who they couldn't beat. So I'm like, I'm in a spot right now where I'm just like, it's just the worst position possible. And we did do very well against the Braves in August, and that's cool. But I'm not confident in that again for round 2.
Yeah, 100%. I'm in the same boat as you. I mean, it's one of those things where they really. I was looking at the schedule like going into September and then seeing the end. I'm like, all right, well, I don't feel too bad about it, blah blah this. And now just looking at it, I'm like, damn. And you can argue the Braves might be resting starters, whatever they might do, whatever. But like, they're still going to start Matt Olson. They're still going to start Acuna. Like they're still gonna start those guys. So
them guys don't rest.
Exactly. So it's gonna be a rough road. But Gabe, what are your thoughts so far on the Cubs right now? As you know, they're 8-11 in September. So it's probably been one of their worst months lately, and they've cooled off certainly.
My thoughts on it is real plain and simple, man. Welcome to the pressure cooker. This is what playoff baseball is all about.
Yep.
You know, and like Rick Ross once said, the game ain't based on success. And you gotta win in order to get in. And they haven't done that. I believe they're 8-11 thus far in the month of September as a club. And when you consider where this ball club was after sweeping the Giants following Labor Day, they had put themselves in a very good position to where they won at least 2 out of 3 in every series. If they was gonna get this wild card. Now I see a team that is collapsing a little bit. Justin Steele had a phenomenal year. Is in the running still for the Cy Young Award, even though you do have some people that say it's over. And I understand your point, Mike. However, in the month of September, he looks like he's gotten tired. And it's going to be up to the Cubs offense to try and pick up not only pitchers like Steele, but their bullpen. Because you saw it yesterday evening. They get down by 6-7 runs. Ian Happ hits a home run, grand slam, cuts the lead to within 2. You got a ball game, but your bullpen's not holding up. And this is why you had so many Cub fans, at least Cub fans that I know, who were calling for Jed Hoyer in the front office to make moves to bolster the bullpen, knowing that they had a shot to at least contend not only for the Central Division at the time, but the National League wild card and getting at least one out of those top 3 spots. I don't understand why David Ross isn't playing the young players. Canario, you waited over a week to play this guy. He comes up, steps up in a big spot for you with a 5 RBI game, hits a grand slam, had a key double in the game as well. You got to play these guys, man. See what they made of. PCA, I mean, I know he's had some struggles at the plate, but defensively, he's been a huge presence for you. You know, with that speed and that glove that he has, it's solid. You got to see what you have in these young players, and you can't be afraid to play them over veterans that's not cutting on a corner for you at this time of the year when you have a playoff spot in the line. You can make the argument, even though that David Ross is in the running for manager of the year in the National League, that he's on a hot seat.
I'm with you, Gabe. I've been very vocal about I'm not a believer in Rossi. I love him as a player.
A lot of people I know say that.
Yeah, love him as a person, love him as a player. But I'm over it. You know, we talked about with Saul the other day. I truly believe Christopher Morel can hit 40 home runs a year. He's played less than 100 games and he has over 20 home runs. And if you would just play this kid, oh, well, he's inconsistent at the plate. Well, his play is inconsistent, and he's either in the outfield or he's at third base or he's DHing. And it's like there's all these different inconsistencies. His playing time is just inconsistent. There's a lot of favoritism with Ross. And I've said it all year long. I see Joe Girardi up in the booth talking for Marquee Sports, and that's cool. But I'd rather have Joe Girardi out on the field with his team and then really just trying to be the best version of him. He's still young, still in his 50s, still doing his thing. I mean, I love Rossi, but if you want another a former Cubs catcher on this team that can be a manager, it's Joe Girardi 100%.
Yeah, no. And I mean, look, it's one of those things too, where like, I'm not Ross defender, but I think a lot of the times, like usually when people I'm talking about the people on Twitter, like the people that like reply to all the tweets, like on like the at Cubs, it's like always like when the Cubs lose, it's all Ross's fault, but then like the Cubs win, right, and it's like it's I don't know, it's just so random and so like right, some of these fans are crazy, but trust me, I definitely see the criticism with Ross. I will not sit here and defend the dude because at the end of the day, I feel like a lot of the decisions he's made are questionable, and for the most of the season they've worked, and I think that's why for like before September, I should say, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna ride it out. It is what it is. Like I'm not gonna sit here and say Ross is the next Joe Torre, but at the end of the day, some of these things he's made is kind of odd, kind of like especially with pitching and all that stuff, and like but also, get to Gabe's point about guys getting tired. You're right about that for sure. I mean, guys we have guys like Merriweather and Leiter who have never pitched in September, let alone Steele, of course, over 180 innings and all that. But like, also it's just injuries at bad times, right? I mean, Fulmer's, back-to-back IL stints now. Alzolay, of course, he's on the IL. You know, and not even that, but I mean, I feel like no, it's been, you know, under talked. Like nobody's talked about Candelario being out of the lineup, how much that's affected the lineup, because even
Yes.
when he doesn't hit, he puts up great at bats. And I think that's kind of like, you know, the talk with, like, for example, Talkman, who like a lot of people don't want in the lineup as well, but at least he walks. I know
Right.
with the fact like Master Boney, I know that somebody put out a line last night that Master Boney's been actually decent since July, but
Yeah.
in my opinion, he's not one of those guys that got us here, though. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like to a certain extent, you know, I know Talkman has like a 50 weighted runs created plus, like in like the last 2 months, but like I get it. He did kind of earn a spot on the team compared to other guys.
Yeah. Oh,
But
he shut me up last night, Sal. I mean, I made a tweet and I was like, "Why is Master Boney playing?" And then he has a 3
yeah,
hit night,
Mr.
and
Man.
I was like,
Yeah.
"All right, well, whatever, bro."
I
I
saw that
know.
lineup.
Yeah.
I saw that lineup before the game, and I was talking with a friend of mine by the
Mhm.
name of Andrew Garcia, who's a big
Mhm.
Cubs fan.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, man, Ross is wild. I got a playoff spot. Like Candelario had a 5 RBI game
Mhm.
after going a week or two without playing since being called up, and you don't even want to put him in as a DH again after that. Like you need all the offense you can get right now, especially after having a week where your offense was in a funk.
Right. And I think the big thing, that we talk about it is like the way he's doubled PCA in at bats already is absolutely crazy. And I love PCA. I want that
Mhm.
known. Like I've had great conversations with him in Des Moines. He's a great kid. He's got a great head on his shoulder. He's got a great family. But I think the problem with that for me was this kid's been in Iowa for a month. I don't care about his development. I think saw him his last day in Iowa. He hit a grand slam. He's absolutely flourishing. He's not flourishing up here. He's not getting enough playing time. He's not getting enough service. A guy like Canario, he's been in AAA Iowa for about a year and a half and some change now. Obviously, he was injured for a part of that, but
Mhm.
he definitely has been there. He's felt that presence. He knows that big league experience. And we talk about it already in 6 games. PCA is what, 0 for 9 now, 0 for 10? And you're
Mhm.
like, in one game, Canario is just showing you like, hey, I can be here. But Saul, I think you made a great point too about just overworking pitchers. I think Adbert's injury had a huge part to him just closing every single night. It felt like
Mhm.
in the month of August and early September, I'm seeing Adbert every single night go crazy with the fist pumps. And it's like, I
Mhm.
love that. Don't get it twisted. But exactly where we are right now is like, you have to be able to bring in a guy like Ben Brown. You have to bring in a guy in the minors to kind of just spread that out. Even if it's not great, you got to spread it out so these guys can be fully healthy come October.
Yeah, exactly. And I think eh, I just, for me, it's just surprising because I don't think I've ever seen somebody stick to their guns like to this extent. Like I understand the what where Ross is coming from of playing certain guys and you
Yeah.
know picking certain dudes out, but like never. I don't think I've ever seen somebody like stick to their word as much as Ross has when it comes to not playing guys. And it's funny because and you probably come across this guy in Iowa, you know, Mike, but there, you know, Tommy Birch, he tweeted out the other day after Canario's big day. He's like, man, Canario's, you know, I think I'm gonna mess it up, but basically he was saying he's like Canario played his way into maybe getting a pinch hit role tomorrow, and it's
Man,
like, yeah, because
man,
Also, too,
and he was right, and he was right because he didn't start the next day. He, you know,
right.
so
And it's
so
it's the it's the Joe Madden type of matchup
yeah,
card thing that I'm
yeah,
over. Like I don't care
yeah.
about the matchup. Who's hot right now?
Mhm. Yeah, and I think ultimately too, like I was talking to a buddy too. He's a big Yankees fan, and we're talking about analytics and all that stuff. And I'm pretty sure, like, if I had to put my money on, and we've talked about it on here, I think before, Gabe, but I'm pretty sure for the most part, David Ross is to make the lineup. Like, I bet you it's one of those things where analytic wise, they're giving a lot of what he wants, and he just like the messenger. Maybe he doesn't. That sometimes I think with certain managers too. I'm like, he probably doesn't like half the stuff he's saying, but he just has to say it because he's the manager.
Right,
But that's just
right,
like who knows how stuff works back there. But like it's just the way that it seems to me because like David Ross, especially, like he seemed to me like when we hired him as a manager, he seemed to me like the type of dude that best player is going to bat third or fourth, in the 2000s, stuff like that, right? But no, I mean, like his lineups look very much like a modern analytic lineup. I mean, when you got Master Boney, in there frequently, so it's one of those things. But Gabe, do you want to say something? You kind of like you want to say
Yeah, because nowadays you really don't know who's setting the lineup
yeah,
for.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, the manager has some say and input, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not like it used to be back in the day. Like you got managers working hand in hand with the
Mm-hmm.
GM. And like you said, analytics do play a role. But
Mm-hmm.
at some point, I don't care how valuable analytics is. Like Mike said,
Yeah.
you got to go with the guys that are hot. And in today's game of baseball right now, young players coming up from the minors can bring a joke to your ball club. And a guy like Canario, if he can hit the way that he showcased his ability to hit in his debut, if he can do that consistently, that
Mm-hmm.
could be the difference between you being either on the outside looking in or
Yep.
being in the park. And young bats this time of year, who most of these teams have no scouting reports for at the major league level, can serve as an added advantage for your ball club. We've seen this many times, man. And you just gotta you gotta play the young guys. Like I said, I've said this the last 3 or 4 times I've been on. Look at Cincinnati. They played their young guys, and what do you know? They in the thick of the wild card race still.
Right.
Even though Ellie De La Cruz is in the midst of a cold stretch, they've had other young guys like Christian Encarnacion try and step up to the plate. You know, Spencer Steer and those guys. They weren't afraid. Look at Baltimore with Heston Kjerstad right now. Look at what he's doing. They're playing him every night as a designated hitter. You have to play these guys because they inject life into your ball club in the heat and the thick of a pennant race that can make or break your ball club.
Man, I will say this though. I can't speak on Ellie. I can't speak on Ellie. He broke my heart. Paid over $100 to see him play. He went 0 for 5 on the day at Wrigley Field. I couldn't stand it. Not one hit. But so I want to pose this one to you. Just kind of throw it to you really quick because this was one that it happened so long ago. It feels like, but it bothered me. You know, you give Eric Hosmer and Trey Mancini all the chances in the world, each getting over 200 at bats. And then Matt Mervis, who is still currently batting over 300 in Iowa, he's batting 167 in the year in the 90 at bats that you gave him, but you didn't allow him to really just get a feel for it. You didn't give him the opportunity. And in September, I get it. You know what I mean? Yeah, put Cody at first. I get it. You got to win ball games. But when was that? May? Like June?
Yeah.
That's when we were having the conversation about Matt Mervis in Chicago. And it's like, I understand you're about the veterans. I understand you're about the guys who are going to make an impact now, but the guys who are the future aren't going to be able to make an impact if you never give them the opportunity to do so. And I think guys like Morel, Merv, Canario, PCA, who, to your point, I think that's hey, you're playing this kid. Like, we need you to play this kid. You have no, I don't care what your analytics say. I don't care if he's 0 for 9. He's going to be batting 100 at some point. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to be there. He's going to get his first hit. And they kind of just want to see that. But I think with these kids, man, especially let's talk about Miguel Amaya. I mean, I know this turned into an anti-David Ross thing very quick, but like Yan Gomes has been great, and I get that. But I'll DH him. I'll DH him right now. I'll put Christopher Morel at third. He's done it his entire career. For whatever reason, we feel like we can't put him at third, and we have to put him in the outfield, which he's never played until he joined the Cubs. It's one of those conversations to me where it's like, why isn't Mickey catching every day? I don't know. And it's like Ross doesn't have an answer for you. Why isn't Mickey DHing? Why don't you see him pinch hitting more? And it's like, to Gabe's point, like I'm watching Gunnar Henderson and I'm watching Adley and all these guys, Jack Flaherty even rejuvenate their careers because they get opportunities. And it's like I'm at the point with Rossi where I'm like, you got all these guns, but you're putting no bullets in them. And it's like there's no reason for this. And it's like we have all of them here. And it's like we just got to use them.
Yeah, and I think even to how you guys are talking about Matt Mervis and all that, and it's true. And also the way he finished the season was great too. And also, why not bring him up, like even a bat off the bench? I don't care. Like I'm not obviously as you said, start Bellinger at first. I understand that for sure. But like even you could DH him too, Matt Mervis, like the way the type of power he has. And I think also just the fact that like you know you're bringing up guys like Jared Young that like no offense to Jared Young, he's a guy who's been up here before, done it before, right? But I think I would prefer to see a guy like like Matt Mervis or guys like that. So that's the thing. It's just some of the decision making that's a little odd.
Especially because, Sal, really quick though, what's the difference between Matt
Yeah.
Mervis and Jared Young at the big league level? What's the difference?
Exactly.
I see the minor league difference. One guy's batting 200, one guy's batting 350, and it's like, okay, so give me the 22-year-old.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the way for sure. I see that for sure. And I think another thing I wanted to ask you guys about is how have you felt about like Stroman coming out of the bullpen? Because I think he's come because he could be a very important part in this last 10-game stretch for the Cubs with guys going down like I said, Fulmer, like Adbert and all that. I mean, Mike, what have you thought about him coming out of the pen? I know some people were a little bit like where they were it was a questionable move to put him back to back and put him back to back games late in Arizona. But to be fair, he did what he could. He didn't pitch bad or anything like that. What have you thought about Stroman out of the pen?
He did really well. I mean, he really, he exceeded expectations for me, especially in that Arizona series where, I mean, they couldn't hit water if they fell out of a boat. So, I mean, it was just one of those instances where it's like, what am I taking away from this game? And what I saw was Marcus Stroman's ability to actually go deep into games. And he was going a little deep, a couple innings in there. I'm curious to see. It's not definitive. I know they're very weary and they avoid it. I avoid it like a cold, man. They do not want to talk about him starting in October. But, I definitely think I'm at that point to where if we get a couple more weeks of this and we see him around Atlanta series, around the final series against the Brewers, you got to have that conversation of like, all right, bro, well, you're giving me 2-3 innings. Maybe we can do something. Maybe we can have someone start for you. I know we don't like the Drew Smiley starting and then obviously someone coming in for him. But, I could see that getting played at some point to where it's like, okay, maybe we'll have 2 starters on that day. Maybe we'll have Javier Assad start the game and then Marcus Stroman finish it. You know what I mean? Like maybe we can do something with this. And I think it's a positive thing for me, especially with a rib injury like that, to see this kid trying to just get the best version of himself. And, I've heard a couple people say there's a likelihood he opts into his player option at the end of the year just because of this situation. So it honestly might have been a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing in that I'm like, man, have him another year, and then seeing what happens next year, how it works out. I think that's great, especially because the Cubs, we saw how much this rotation missed him when he was out. Despite Javier Assad having a great, he had a great stretch there, but we saw him a little bit have a couple shaky starts at the beginning of September, but we saw it there. But Gabe, what has been your thoughts on just Stroman? This situation kind of reminds me a little bit, just to kind of relate it to the White Sox here, and just the how having Kopech as a bullpen, seeing how he reacts to that. We're kind of having the same thing on the north side with a veteran like Stroman, the first time coming out of the pen like that. How do you feel like in general of having a situation like that on the north side?
It's interesting to me, especially a guy that's been known as a starter throughout the majority of his career. But when you look at the Cubs bullpen and the lack of veteran arms within it, they're gonna need him to step up for them in any role and way in which he's asked to under David Ross. And I don't see an issue with it. However, if you're gonna, let's just say they do, hold on to wild card spot and they get one of those 3 wild card spots, I don't think starting Smiley as a spot starter is a good idea. I would probably go with Jordan Hicks before I go with Drew Smiley in that situation, to at least serve in a 2 to 3 inning limit role, and then let Stroman have the rest of the game, depending on the matchup and how they want to do it. But I don't mind Stroman pitching out the bullpen for them as long as it can help them. But he's like you said, Mike, with this schedule, Atlanta, they're not resting anybody. And I caught this team, the Cubs, when they played Atlanta and they won the 3rd game of that series to take 2 out of 3. Even though that was a game in which they won and were up in front for the majority of it, Atlanta was never out of it. And they're never out of a ball game with the firepower that they have offensively. And Milwaukee is playing for the Central. So Colorado, you got to take care of them this upcoming weekend. And you damn sure got to beat Pittsburgh to avoid losing what I believe would be the 3rd or 4th series in a row.
Yeah, 4th straight series.
You can't lose this series.
No, yeah, and I think this homestand, people were saying like, man, I think you really can't go anything worse than 5-1. Like,
just margin for error is very small.
Exactly, and they already got the loss on Wednesday, so it's all about winning from here on now, and that's the thing. Like, it's one of those things where, at the same time, as annoying as it is, it also kind of punches this team into overdrive, into like a postseason mode now, which I think is nice. And that's the last thing I want to ask you guys about the Cubs before we head into the White Sox segment of this is obviously still a long way to go. 10 games, still got to see if they even get in. But at the same time, kind of how you said with the blessing in disguise with the Strowman thing, Mike. How do you feel about it? Maybe being a blessing in disguise that might have that third spot and then face Milwaukee in the wild card series? Because in my opinion, it's a better matchup than going up against the Phillies, who I'm not saying the Cubs can't beat them, but when you go up there and you got to face Zach Wheeler in game one, something like that, or like, face Taiwan Walker, who the Cubs didn't look that great against, like, and then that offense that they have. Honestly, and then also you go to Milwaukee where it's like Wrigley Field North. I know they might do something weird with the tickets where they don't let Cubs fans like they tried to do last time, all
Oh yeah.
that. But how do you feel about like, that might be a blessing in disguise?
Respectfully, fuck that. I'm not trying to go there. I'm not trying to go there,
I
bro.
like your attitude, Mike. I like
because
it.
I don't want those problems right now. I really don't got the time for it or the energy for it. I think because here's where I'm at with it is like obviously they already understand they're licking their chops against us all year long. We've had problems facing them all year. We're gonna end the year playing them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I feel like that's not a positive thing for us. And
Mm-hmm.
seeing them again is not going to benefit our bullpen because I feel like our bullpen, what we're so good at is guys that you haven't seen before. You
Mm-hmm.
haven't seen a Javier Assad at a high level. That was why he was so good last year. At the beginning of this year, he's kind of shaky. People
Mm-hmm.
watched a lot of him in the World Baseball Classic. Now you're starting to see him more. You have more scouting reports on these guys. To see them all, guys like we talked about, Mastroboni, Talkman. There's
Mm-hmm.
certain guys on this team. It's like a boat. You've got a couple holes here and there. And when you really point out those holes, they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I
Mm-hmm.
think when you go against a team like Philly, the inconsistencies are everything. The inconsistencies between, Castellanos and Schwarber and Harper and obviously Trey Turner, who was one of the worst players in baseball in the beginning of the year and is
Mm-hmm.
now amazing. It's definitely a conversation to where I think the lineups are very similar for the Cubs when you look at a team against Philly. And I think to Gabe's point, like, I don't like the idea of, and it's just an example, of course, Drew Smiley's awful, but I don't like the idea of Jordan Wicks, splitting with Stroh because I actually believe in Jordan Wicks to be able to go deep into a game. So what I do think in a 3-game series, if you give me Justin Steele, Jordan Wicks, and then maybe you split it between Javier Assad and Marcus Stroman, I'm kind of with it. I'm down for it, and I'm ready for that. Now, I don't want Kyle Hendricks anywhere near that Philly offense whatsoever. But I definitely do think between those 4 guys, I think it's a recipe for success. Whereas with Milwaukee, like we've seen them all year, and so what have we been able to do all year?
It is 6-6.
I mean, but that's not like that's not going to help me in the wild card at Milwaukee. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's definitely questionable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from, and I mean, at the end of the day, like if you ask me, I'd rather finish in the second spot, anyways. Like it is what it is. But I'm just thinking to myself, like familiarity and the fact that Hendricks and Stroman got good numbers. If Stroman obviously comes back, I think and Steele pitched well against them, so it's one of those things where just kind of familiarity and just like seeing because I don't know, Philly just scares me because despite
Right.
the guys they have in there like Castellanos and all that stuff, like I don't know. Harper, I mean, we've seen what he can do in the playoffs before.
Cubs
I
killing.
mean,
Cubs killing.
yeah, for real. So that's why I'm like, I don't know. Don't get me wrong. It's you're still picking your poison at the end of the day.
Right.
But I just like the way that, or I should say I like the Brewers lineup better to face in like a playoff series because one, I know that at the end of the day they always get clutch hits because when the time matters, when the games matter most, the Brewers somehow play like the 1932 Yankees. So like I get it, I understand. So yeah, I guess we'll see. But Gabe, what about you? What's your take on if you had to pick an opponent here, or which opponent for the Cubs do you think is a better matchup?
I mean, the way I see it, either way, you got to go on the road.
Yeah.
Either way. So, and you got to win 2 out of 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand the argument that you make to face Milwaukee because this is something that I thought about, and I was talking about with one of my friends. I said, well, maybe if they did get the 3rd wild card spot, it wouldn't be a bad thing. However, to Mike's point, when you bring up Philadelphia, this is a team that you haven't seen as much as opposed to Milwaukee. Milwaukee knows your tendencies. This is a team that you played 12, 13 times out the year. And to play them after having to face them in your last 3 games, man, That's a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you would be able to bring more fans to Miller Park or whatever they call it now, like you'll be able to
American
bring more
Family
fans.
Insurance.
Yeah, American Family Insurance Park. Like you will have your fans there and all of that. But to me, I mean, just look at what happened last year. We thought the Mets, when they had won over 100 plus games, on cakewalk to the LDS round against San Diego, and San Diego shocked the world.
Yep.
It can happen. And Kyle Schwarber, as much as I like his power, he's not known for hitting for average. Like that offense can be very hot and cold. And in October, anything can happen. So if you're gonna pick your poison, why not get one of the best teams out the paint and get that fifth seed? Why not?
Yeah, and I think I like that. I get in that mentality. I also understand where you guys come from too, because look, at the end of the day, you're in the playoffs. All these teams are the best, obviously, and almost sometimes you have that sense of like, I do just want to face that, like the best team. You know what I mean? You do want to face so you can take them down or whatever, right? Because like either way, either avenue you go in, especially if you take on Milwaukee in the first round and you got to face the Dodgers in the second round, and then if you go, you face the Phillies, you got to face Atlanta. So either way, it's a buzz saw that's gonna be, it's just gonna be crazy. But they got to get there first, and they got a series, against the Rockies this weekend. Then of course, like Mike said, Atlanta and Milwaukee to end the season on the road. So a week from now, we could be talking the Cubs got cooked, or they're cooked. Who knows? Or we could be talking vice versa, that they're getting hot at the right time. Who knows? But we'll switch over to the White Sox now. We're 55-92. But you know what? Despite the rough season and not much to look at on the standings, they're still adding pieces. They're adding pieces to the front office. They added Josh Barfield from the Arizona Diamondbacks, Brian Bannister from the Giants, and Gene Watson from the Royals. Now, Gabe, want to get your opinion on those guys. What do you think about those additions? And are those guys that you had on your radar? I know Brian Bannister maybe was probably the one that was talked about the most out of those three, at least what I heard when it comes to the GM position or the president position for the Sox. But how do you feel about those additions and what they could bring to the Sox?
I honestly like all three of them, and I'm gonna tell you why. They all came from outside the organization. That's all that the White Sox fan base has wanted. And I tell you why I like all three of them, starting with Josh Barfield. Josh Barfield was a guy who was once a top 20 prospect in the league. He played in the league. Comes from a baseball bloodline. His father, Jesse, was born and raised in Joliet before he became an all-star with the Toronto Blue Jays in the mid-'80s. And he's a baseball lifer. And he helped architect a farm system in Arizona that has been among the top 10 in baseball over the last 4 years and running until recently with the midseason rankings, according to MLB Pipeline. He's worked alongside of and helped develop guys such as Alec Thomas, a local Chicagoland native who went to Mount Carmel High School. Corbin Carroll just became the first rookie to ever have a 25 home run and 50 plus stolen base season out in the desert. And Jake McCarthy, like they've developed young talent. They even made a nice deal flipping one of the players that they developed in Dalton Varsho to the Toronto Blue Jays in exchange for Gabby Moreno, who's been solid for them behind the plate and could potentially develop into an all-star for years to come out in the NL West in Arizona. So I like what they got with him, and that's a guy that I would think Getz would call upon to be in charge of his farm system, or at least serve as a director of some sort, knowing that he has a role or previously held a role as the director of player development in Arizona. Brian Bannister, former Royal, father, was in the league. Floyd Bannister was the number 1 overall pick, pitched for the 1983 Sox winning ugly squad. And he has experience working in multiple organizations. He's not afraid of using analytics and measuring, certain statistical data and whatnot to help pitchers maximize the talent that they have. And the White Sox, prior to this move, never had a director of pitching in the history of their franchise, which says a lot when you think about the number of pitchers that have been developed on the South Side and became all-stars, such as Wilson Alvarez back in the day, Alex Fernandez, Mark Burley, and the like, under guys like Don Cooper and now Ethan Katz. To have a pitching director, I think that's great. And I can't wait to see what ideas he has and incorporates, especially when you consider the fact that when he was in San Francisco, he worked with guys like a Logan Webb, Kevin Gausman, before he went to Toronto, where you see him now lighting it up as an all-star, for the border. And then Gene Watson, even though I know a lot of White Sox fans have issues with guys with former Royals ties coming here, he's an old school scout, been around for over a quarter century, worked with the Braves, worked with the Marlins and the Padres. This team needed fresh blood. And I think this only marks the beginning of what's to come, because I see a lot of people being replaced sooner rather than later. And Chris Getz might be some White Sox fans' only hope when it comes to bringing outside voices into the organization, because as we know, Jerry Reinsdorf is not going to do it.
No, yeah, you're right, and I think that's what I like about these guys and the guys that they added, especially a Josh Barfield, who's come from an organization that's very successful when it comes to the MLB pipeline and all that, and getting guys to the big leagues who we've already seen up close, especially Cubs fans. We saw Gabby Moreno, out there. Obviously he came in a deal, but we saw him and how they've helped him develop into like a great catching hit. I mean, the Diamondbacks probably aren't where they're at now without a guy like Moreno. So that whole system has been successful, from developing players to getting players from other organizations and all that. So definitely, that's probably my favorite out of the three. But all three guys have benefits, especially from the type of organizations they come from. From Gene Watson having experience with the Central, Brian Bannister, as you said, having connections to the White Sox with his dad. But Mike, let me ask you, how do you feel about not only just these additions to the White Sox front office, but how do you feel about the direction the White Sox are going in? A lot of people we talked about in the show, a lot of people didn't like the Chris Getz, acquisition, or not the acquisition, the promotion. But at the same time, with additions like these, you kind of like the direction he's going and what he's bringing guys from outside. How do you feel about the White Sox direction right now?
I'm 1 foot in, 1 foot out,
Mm-hmm.
especially with Jerry. I'm a diehard Bulls fan. The
Mm-hmm.
Sox are the Sox at the end of the day, but Bulls are my life, and Jerry owns both of them. So it's very unfortunate. But with that being said, I always call him the Richard Daly of sports. And for everybody that's any part of Chicago, you understand. I mean, he's a good old boy. I mean, he's gonna put guys in power who have no business being there just because he owes them favors or because he cares about them. And it's one of those conversations to Gabe's point. Every single point Gabe made, I loved. But that one point you made right there, you still putting guys in power that you're friends with. You're still putting former players, former teammates, whatever, former colleagues, friends, whatever. You're putting them in powers of status. And it kind of reminds me of the Chicago Bears with Ted Phillips. Like, okay, cool. Ryan Poles is here. Okay, cool. You finally got a head coach. Okay, but Ted Phillips is still running the operations, and he's not good at what he does. And there's just all these different situations to where it's like, especially with the Reinsdorf family, like, we got to understand what we're doing. If you want to just, be Jerry Jones of the world, that's fine. You can do that. But don't be 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I love the direction they're going in, but I still see trickles of Jerry making moves. And I think that's where his son Michael and so many other people in the family have started to do better and really started to do their homework on bringing in baseball-minded guys and basketball-minded individuals for the Bulls. And I'm really liking the direction that goes, but you still feel that family presence. And that has to go. That has to go in order to have success. But I think, obviously, in my personal opinion, I think Rick Hahn got the short end of the stick. I think he was very limited into what he was allowed to do and the people he was allowed to hire. And bringing in free agents was not a thing. You know what I mean? I mean, we talk about it all the time. This is my last point on it. Manny Machado, Bryce Harper, Shohei Ohtani, Mike Trout, and all these other players became free agents throughout the last 6 years. And a Chicago baseball market, both Chicago baseball markets, we got to own that too. We got to own that too. Yeah. We didn't re-sign Rizzo, Bryant, or Baez or any of them.
Mm-hmm.
Both Chicago markets landed none of them. And it's like, we have the market. We have the money. Why aren't we using any of it? And it comes to a point to where that's the only thing I'm really starting to notice. This was a nice core. Gabe, I don't know if you're a diehard Sox fan, but I got to give you
I am to the core. My mom worked for the franchise, man. I know Jerry personally. So the things you saying, I don't disagree with them, because me and my mother have had many conversations about Jerry Reinsdorf, and I know how he rolls. And his imprint is still on this franchise. But I am willing to give Chris Getz a chance. And the one thing I do respect that Chris is doing is he's bringing outside voices in and outside minds in, something that Rick Hahn had the chance to do, but he did not do it. And I do agree, Rick Hahn in some ways did get the short end of the stick. And at one point, he was one of the most trustworthy GMs in this city when he was building this organization up fresh off of a rebuild and bringing in top end prospects with the pursuit and the aspiration to win a world championship. The problem that I had with Rick Hahn was is when he invested the money into the ball club, he invested mostly into the bullpen.
Mm-hmm.
Where were my positional players? Where was my nine-figure player? Manny Machado, out of all the guys you named, was the guy that I honestly believe they had the best chance of landing. The fact that they didn't land him will always be one of the biggest what ifs. I think things got off the rail with the White Sox and their aspirations to win a world championship in a manner akin to the way that the Cubs did it in 16. It got off the rails when Tony La Russa was hired. Because even though Tony La Russa was one of the most accomplished managers in the history of the game, and he did have unfinished business on the South Side, haven't gotten fired, and this being the only stop that he had never won a World Series title at, he was old. And they never had a backup plan for him because anybody could have seen that that was going to be no more than a 2 to 3 year experience.
Right.
And you needed to have a backup plan in place, and they did not. And when they didn't, things got off the rails. Why? Because they didn't have players that had the ability to police themselves, nor possess the discipline to know what it takes to win and develop a winning mindset, which it all starts in the offseason.
For sure.
Yeah, and I think, that's at least, I feel like with the White Sox, the way I would see it if I was a White Sox fan is that you can't have it perfect. But I mean, if I see some kind of light at the end of the tunnel where some kind of positive direction, you got to take it and run with it. I think that's a good thing, at least, because it might be right. Because I mean, you right. I mean, that's the way I see it.
I mean,
people
I'm not a man of hope personally. I mean,
yeah.
I'm a man of results and action.
Yeah.
And I believe in having faith over hope. But
right.
what I will say is when I look at what Chris is doing, at least he's bringing outside voices.
Yeah.
And I do see things change. And the thing that I need to see next from Chris is Kenny Williams Jr. out of there, who was in a role where he was serving as a player development in the minor league system. I don't put all of the minor league struggles all on Chris Getz. I do believe that there were some ideas that Chris Getz had that he wasn't allowed to bring to the table because he was the third in command. And it was a Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams-led show. And I do agree with Jerry in regards to making Chris Getz the single decision maker. Now, what I want to make sure of as a White Sox fan is, are these guys all on the same page? And can we work together to ensure that we get more people in the analytics department and as well as on the international side of things to ensure that we're scouting and developing players at a great level? You don't have to spend a wide array of money to build a World Series contender. This season, if any season, should show that. Look at what the Yankees have done. Look at what the Padres have done. Look at what the Mets have done. They spent all that money, but they're going to be on the outside looking into the postseason in October. Meanwhile, the Baltimore Orioles, on the other hand, are in the playoffs. The Tampa Bay Rays, on the other hand, are in the playoffs. And these teams didn't spend a high amount of money. They drafted well and they developed well and they scouted well.
Right. I think a big thing too, and it bothers me when you say this, Saul, because we're Chicagoans and we're supposed to feel this way. We're supposed to have everything at our disposal. When you say, we just can't have it perfect. And then I look over at what LA does and I watch the Dodgers and I watch the Yankees and I'm like, nah, y'all development and y'all recruiting and y'all free agency, it's fucking perfect. Like, what are we talking about? Bobby Miller is just some random white guy they found out the street, and he's looking like one of the best young prospects they're ever going to see. Yep. And I'm like, and it's one of those conversations where I'm like, no, shit could be pretty lit. Like, it could be pretty dope in here, and it's just not. And that's like my main problem right now is like, we had those conversations about the Cubs and Theo Epstein, and it's like, cool, we got great prospects, and you keep shipping them off. Like, at some point, to Gabe's point, trust the process. Now, if you're the Philadelphia 76ers and the process is 10 years old, all right, we're going to have to start conversations. But, you definitely understand at the end of the day, guys like Yohan Moncada, I remember when Yohan Moncada, I was a sophomore or a junior in high school, and they get Yohan Moncada, and you're like, yo, this kid has the intangibles to be one of the next biggest faces in baseball. Crapshoot. Like, why? The development system. And that's really just what it is. And, we talk about it all the time. The 2015 Cubs, great young core. The only thing they needed to do, you didn't need the Manny Machados of the world. You didn't need these big names. You just needed a couple guys who knew how to win. You brought in Hayward, you brought in Zobrist, you brought in Chapman, you brought in a few other pieces. Dexter Fowler came back. You bring in the pieces that you know are going to help when these young guys don't know how to perform in October. These guys do. That's why Ben Zobrist is a World Series MVP. And you start to have those conversations and you say, what did the White Sox do? Andrew Benintendi, Dallas Keuchel, and Joe Kelly were the moves. That was it. Like
the biggest move they made in the championship window, honestly, was trading for Craig Kimbrell.
Yeah.
They never made the move. And that's why I always.
And they didn't need him.
Yeah. And that's why I always get into it with so many White Sox fans. How can you say that we were in a championship window when the house was never fully built? Andrew Benintendi, I didn't have a problem with, but you never got me my right field. You never got me my second baseman. And then, even though Yoan Moncada was the number one prospect in all of baseball, you gave him everything. And you never had a replacement that was quality enough to make him look over his shoulder until Jake Burger came along. And then when Jake Burger came along and started to make his upward stride,
I was about to go there.
You trade him. You trade him. Despite the fact that you had several years of team control and he's making under $1 million. Now, I understand to a certain degree maybe why you did it when you got a Brian Ramos in your system who has some solid pop. I get it when you got a guy like a Wilfred Barris who has some solid pop, and this is a team that consists of several DHs, and I do think that that's going to get solved. But this team thought that they were going to be able to bludgeon you to death with power and that they were going to be able to win on the margins. But if your power isn't hitting for power and your bullpen isn't able to help you retain the leads that you get, you have a problem, especially when you were a team that was designed to win on the margins and not in all three levels or phases of the game, from offense to defense and with your pitching. And the way I see it, this team needs to get faster. They need to get athletic, like Chris Getz said. And they need to do something that Chris Getz did. I know he was not a star player. But one thing I know about Chris Getz, he was very aware of the strike zone. He had good plate discipline. He was a guy that could run on the base paths. We need guys that can do that. And until we find out how to take advantage of the 90 feet and to win the 90 feet, you're not going to be able to win at this level. I'm sorry.
And but Gabe, they do have a chance. Have one question for you, though. Like, and so I know I'm not a huge White Sox fan, but I follow them. I pay attention.
Same.
I got them on my phone. I'm a big prospect guy, and I'm always looking for the Angels, the White Sox, and a couple other organizations. The Orioles were on my account for a long time. I mean, I'm like, all right, well, you guys are asked every year, when are the top prospects going to start coming? And now they're finally flying through. Mm-hmm. And I'm still waiting on that for the Angels. I mean, oh my God, dude, where's the top 100 prospects on the Angels is my question. But you didn't trade them away, so I mean, or no, you did for
yes,
Lucas
they did. We got 2 out of 3 of them now.
But they're not great. You know what I mean? Like you got the shortest kids in the castle, but it's definitely something for me, Gabe, where at some point you got to acknowledge the rotation. And I think that was a huge problem. I mean, you talked about Craig Kimbrell, and that's the only part I wanted to mention, because it's like Liam Hendriks at that time. Now, Tommy John and cancer and all these other horrible things that he's experienced since definitely makes sense if it happened today. But at that time, Liam Hendriks was an all-star, if I'm not mistaken, when they made that trade. He was the best closer in baseball. You traded for another closer who's never been anything more than a closer. And how do you bring in a bullpen? Gabe, this is me just asking you. How do you continuously every year bring in more arms for the bullpen without addressing the starting rotation? Because you're bringing in guys to save the game when you never had a lead to begin with.
I get what you're saying, because that was an issue too. Because one thing I will say, after the 2021 season, the ace changed every year. 2019, 2020, the number one starter on the White Sox was Lucas Giolito. 2021, it was Lance Lynn. 2022, it was Dylan Cease. This year, I can't really say the White Sox had an ace. And I think right now, the best pitcher, I would say, with the season almost complete was Mike Clevenger. And that's a problem. Mike Clevenger was supposed to be your number 4 or 5-star. He
and
was
Mike's
not supposed to be your number 1 star, you know. So I get what you're saying, but pitching, yeah, it faded when it was actually supposed to get better. And there were a lot of guys that were part of the early days of the rebuild who were supposed to be part of the starting rotation, but ended up getting moved into the bullpen, such as Reynaldo Lopez. Remember, he came up as a starter.
Right.
Michael Kopech, he was a starter, missed the COVID year in 2020. He came back in the bullpen, had a solid 2022, but then he's been on the innings limit. That is why this job is going to be so damn hard for Chris Getz. Because what Chris Getz has to do is figure out, how can I build not only the best 40-man roster, but who's going to be a part of my starting rotation next season? Do I keep Dylan Cease? Do I trade Dylan Cease? Is Michael Kopech a starter? I don't think he is. If he's not, is he in the bullpen? Is he a long relief guy? What about Garrett Crochet, who I drafted in 2020? Is he a starter or a bullpen guy? You know, it's too many up and downs. Nick Nastrini, who you got in the Dodgers trade, I think is a guy who will come up here no later than the 1st of June or July from AAA Charlotte. But will his command be on point? We know he has the talent. When he's striking guys out and his control is solid and he has good command, but that's a young arm that they're going to be calling up. So they got a lot of things. Colson Montgomery's on the rise. Am I trading Tim Anderson? Do I keep Eloy Jimenez? It's a lot of questions. And I don't envy him, like Liam Hendricks said on the White Sox Talk podcast. I don't envy Chris Getz at all because he has a lot of tough jobs and options to consider. And I think this 2024 year is going to be a trial year. And a lot of White Sox fans are going to have to be patient because this shit is not going to change overnight.
Right.
100%. Yeah, I think you guys made some great points. I mean, that is true. And I think it's one of those things where, yeah, I mean, I wish both Chicago organizations were successful like the Dodgers. I'm just like so used to them not. So I'm like,
dude, like,
you know what I mean?
Can I just borrow some of that? Is all I'm asking.
I hope.
You know why the Dodgers successful? They spend the money.
Spend the money and develop well.
Yeah, right. The minor league.
Yep.
It's crazy to me, but like I'm not trying to turn this into a whole Dodgers podcast, but like I watch their, like, being real. Gabe, it's no disrespect. Now I will say one thing that's disrespectful. I want to know how you feel about Nick Madrigal having more home runs than Tim Anderson this year. But on another point of that,
come on,
I do
hurt me. TA still my guy.
The facts don't lie. But and he's 0-for-1 in a fight. But you know, you have that conversation though about the Dodgers, and they have guys in their minor league that I truly believe can start on both the Cubs and the Sox today. They have been in the Futures game for like 3 years in a row, just because the guys in front of them, to Gabe's point, is Freddie Freeman, is Bobby Miller, is Mookie Betts, and it was Justin Turner, and it is all these other big name guys, and it's Cody Bellinger, and it's like, yeah, man, we got some guys that can win MVPs and Rookie of the Year, but we're just gonna hang on to them because we can. And I'm like, man, bro, me looking, you know, Sal, we feel the same way about the third baseman prospects in the Cubs system. I'm looking at that and I'm like, man, fuck you guys. Like, what a luxury to have.
It's bad. Nick Nastrini literally said when he got traded to the White Sox, I knew that my chances of getting traded were extremely high because of the level of talent that comes through the minor league system. He was one of 4 pitchers in their AA system that was projected to have an estimated time arrival of next season. They can only have 5 starters, but they had 4 that were ML quality, and the Sox were able to get him because they had no other place for him. And he's saying how thankful he is just to be here because of the fact that he knows he has a stronger shot at breaking into the big leagues with the Sox as opposed to the Dodgers. But he also gave credit to the Dodgers farm system in regards to his development and helping him gain control of his command, which was coming out of UCLA quite wild prior to him getting drafted by the Dodgers in the 4th round back in 2021.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that's one of those things where they're just, it's so stacked that it's just ridiculous. Like seeing those guys, you know, that guy could, you know, could be the future, you know, third baseman. if there wasn't three other guys in the system. So yeah, I mean it's and again, at the end of the day though, it's still good for the White Sox some of the deals they made, especially. And last thing I'll say about the White Sox too is the Burger deal. I see your point, Mike, and the fact that they maybe they were gave him up and all that, but at the same time, I think the way they were thinking about it was probably like maybe selling high on this guy and probably on what could be his
That's
best season.
exactly what they did.
Yeah, I
know that for a fact.
Yeah.
People that I've talked to in the front office, that's exactly what they did. They sold high on Burger while they could. And I didn't have a problem with the trade, and I'll tell you why. One of the biggest issues with the White Sox is Carlos Rodon has left. And I'm not gonna say he left. They just didn't want to pay. Okay, I'm gonna just put it out there straight up.
Which I'm still
one of the biggest. They had no left-handed pitcher. That's why they had to get J.E. He's one of the top left-handed prospects in the game. Yep. They knew that he was one of the Marlins' top prospects, and they were willing to flip him. And they figured, hey, they had to get pitching. If you notice, all of their deadline moves at the trade deadline was to acquire pitching. Right. There were no top-tier pitchers in the White Sox organization outside of Jorge Berra, who has been injury-prone since they signed him off the international market a few years ago. Now it's nothing but arms if you look at the White Sox top 30 prospects.
100%. And I think that's so important. And Sal and I have talked about it before. We always just bullshit and just text each other about it. But it's the fact that Justin Steele is like a unicorn in the Cubs system right now, because the Cubs have not produced their own pitching staff and their own pitching rotation in years. I mean, we're finally starting to see it all come through. It's coming into fruition. You got Ben Brown, Cade Horton, all these guys, Jordan Wicks, and you're looking at Justin Steele, and it's like you're finally starting to see that change. I wasn't really against the White Sox, when they did the whole Jake Burger thing. But I disagree with you. I know why they did it. And I'm looking at the wild card standings right now. They were just trying to get their lick in. We got the Crosstown Cup. Gabe, I get it. You're upset. You had to do something. I get it. I'm not mad. I'm disappointed is what I am. You know what I am? Like, you could have gave them to us. Like, I would have gave you something nice. I would have gave you Brennan Davis, maybe some.
Hey, it might be a deal in the future between the Sox and the Cubs. You never know. Because even though you all have young arms, you don't have a veteran arm. We don't know what might happen with Dylan Cease.
I need Dylan back. You can keep Eloy. You can keep Eloy and his mom and all that stuff. Like, that's all good. But I need Dylan back. That was an L. For sure.
If the Sox give Dylan to the Cubs or back to the Cubs, I just want a solid outfield prospect. And I'm not talking Brennan Davis.
You could have it like that. I would say, Saul, I want your opinion on this. I'm not even trying to take over this show, but we're talking business now. I'm thinking you can have one of the two. I would give him Canario, or I would give him Ian Happ, and that's really where I'm at with it. And I know you don't want Happer. I know it's a Gold Glove. Right, exactly. It's a Gold Glove. It's an All-Star. He's an All-Star. I mean, it is what it is. You know what I mean? But I believe in Kevin Alcantara, and I believe in PCA a lot more than I do Canario.
That's what Gabe wants, bro. He wants. I know Gabe. Gabe's gonna want PCA or Alcantara. That's right.
I would take Canario, and I'm gonna tell you, I would take Canario because he's an outfielder, and the White Sox need depth in the outfield, particularly in right field. I think left and center is pretty secure at this point as far as contracts go, but they're gonna have to get a right field.
I think Sal, I'm probably on the outside looking in right now. A lot of people are going to disagree with me, but I would give him PCA before I gave him Kevin Alcantara. I'm that high on the kid.
Damn. Okay. I get what you're saying. The bat, because Kevin Alcantara's bat it goes crazy, right?
That's like the Jaguar, baby. That's the Jaguar. I mean, fast, dude.
Hey. When I heard the people talk like calling him that, I'm like, man, I can't wait for him to come up and it's La Pantera versus the Jaguar, bro. Like that.
I'm not even trying to be biased, Gabe. I hope you don't think I'm just unbiased. I'm listening to you. He reminds me, and take the defense out of it. The defense isn't fully there yet. Not even close to Ellie, but he reminds me so much of Ellie physically and what Ellie is able to do from a base running standpoint and just from an offensive production, the pop in this kid's bat. He reminds me so much of Ellie De La Cruz, and I love that. Defensively, I think he's a little lost in the sauce right now. I think he's definitely going to figure it out. But I mean, hey, you can take PCA in his 0 for 9 start because I'm Listen, I saw one kid on Twitter call him Billy Bean the other day, and I damn near cried. I was like,
come on.
don't say that. Don't wish that on me,
That's
bro.
funny.
See, I think with I'm not worried one bit when it comes to PCA because I think he got a
Right.
great, he has great vision at the plate. And I think, some of the guys that he's came into face is some of the best relievers that the other team has. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm not too worried about it, but at the same time, I do understand that the PCA's obviously his strongest suit is his defense, but
Right.
I'm definitely excited to see what Kevin Alcantara is going to do for sure. But
Great
the
Jaguar.
one thing I did want to bring up though before we go is something around the major leagues, and it has to do with the race. They have a stadium deal in place, and it sparked more conversation as to like why why did they do it? Should
I
they
know
have just
why.
left? Blah blah blah. This and that. What are your guys' thoughts? And we'll start with you, Mike. What do you think about this situation with the Rays? Like, do you think they should have dipped out then?
Man, you want my honest answer or do you want my PR answer?
No, give me the honest answer. We want that.
Listen, man, when you got Wander and shit going on, you gotta do something to get the
Yeah.
fans back on your side. I mean, there's a
Yep.
lot of questions going around in the Rays
Yup.
organization right now. You have to have a positive. It's gonna bring in a lot more fans. It's gonna bring in a lot more
Mm-hmm.
revenue, and I think, again, to that point, like you gotta make it appealing to want to
Yep.
go there, and they're not gonna spend the money, so you got to do it in a certain kind of way. And I think it's gonna
Mm-hmm.
be interesting nonetheless. All the Wander jokes aside, because whatever, it's not talked about enough, but
Yeah.
I definitely think at the end of the day, it's going to be really interesting to see if that does change anything for them free agent wise. I really don't think it does because I think at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, keep saying that, but it's always going to come down to them not wanting to extend guys and them not wanting to pay guys. Getting
Mm-hmm.
Jake Berger is kind of their highlight. You know what I mean? They're really big on international guys. They're really big on their scouting department. They're amazing. And we're talking about another individually team that is so good at developing a farm system. I think they're great. But again, we have that conversation with Gabe earlier about the White Sox. What stops you from getting over that hump is you got to start making moves. You got to start bringing in free agent acquisition that's going to actually benefit you, proven veteran guys. They just haven't really been able to do that to a high level. So I think same old Rays, just a better facility.
Yep. And I mean, I've seen the pictures. They have the renderings out for already. It does look like a six stadium.
It's
But it's
dope.
just yeah. And I think I've heard when people talk about like the Rays and Tropicana and the lack of people going to the games and all that. I guess it has to do a lot with. And I've never been to St. Petersburg, so I wouldn't know. But like they said that apparently there's one bridge to get you from Tampa Bay to St. Petersburg,
Yeah,
and it's like a lot of traffic and this and that.
it's a lot of. Gabe, you ever been there?
No, I haven't, but I know some people
Okay.
that's around that
Mhm.
area.
Okay, I want to say this in a nice way for our St. Petersburg listeners. It's just a lot of old people in that
Yeah.
neighborhood.
Yep.
Retirement
Mhm.
period.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I visited there one time, and it's a beautiful place. I felt it was the safest I've ever felt in my whole life growing up in Chicago, and it was like quiet, but it was too quiet, you know. So I feel like having an updated stadium, hey, maybe you'll attract some Miami fans, maybe it'll
Yeah.
attract some more people throughout Florida to really get going.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean they definitely put out the teams every year to garner more fans, but it doesn't work at least at the Trop. So we'll see. But Gabe, what are your thoughts on this situation with the Rays and their stadium?
I'm curious to see how it's going to work. I read a lot locally as far as like with the press from the Tampa Bay Times and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And while you have some people who are thrilled by it, the question has always remained when it came to the Rays is why don't they play in the city of Tampa Bay as
Mhm.
opposed to St. Petersburg? Like Mike
Mm-hmm.
was talking about, he says it's a lot of old people there. Yeah, because most people go to Florida to do what? When they
Retire.
leave the workforce, retire and chill. And it's an area where they developed a little small like celebrity fan base. Like I think the biggest Rays fan I know as far as celebrities go is Dick Vitale. And
Yeah.
that says a lot. No disrespect to Dick Vitale. I
No,
love
yeah.
Dick Vitale as a commentator, whatnot on ESPN, college ball, all that. But like they have had a tough time when it comes to attracting young fans. I
Mhm.
think having a new ballpark will help them do that. I think having a new ballpark will also help their ball club build a revenue stream that can help them not only further enhance their farm system in the minors, but it could help them potentially bring stars to Florida. And I'm going to tell you why. As much as we shit on Tampa Bay, one thing we know about the state of Florida, if we pay attention to economics and business, there are no state taxes. If you build it, they will come. And I'm a firm believer if they continuously find a way to have success as a franchise, in spite of yet to win a World Series, eventually that's going to get a star player's attention and say, you know what? Maybe I will consider Tampa Bay. Hell, if Tom Brady did it, why can't I? Especially when you make it attractive enough to where you're building a new state-of-the-art facility and you're basically reigniting the historical gas plant district that I believe sits on 86 acres. Like the renderings look beautiful. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to see what it can do for them because in my opinion, the Rays, they're up there with the Dodgers as far as like the best when it comes to player development and minor league farm systems. And I know the Wander Franco situation has kind of killed the big time buzz that Tampa had this year getting off to a stellar start. But they got a guy in the minors by the name of Junior Caminero who's coming. And 100%. He could play shortstop or third base for them.
Man, and you know what's crazy about what you just said too? They have multiple third basemen in that top 100 farm system right now in all of baseball. There was a kid, oh man, I'm forgetting his name. It was with a C. Keed. It was
Curtis Mead.
What's his name? Curtis Mead. It was Curtis Mead. I was like, I told everybody, I was like, trade Marcus Stroman for Curtis Mead right now. I'm down. Like, we can get Stroman back in the offseason. It'll be cool. Don't even worry about it. And everyone's like, why? I'm like, bro, listen, he's not even going to play. It's the same thing like the Dodgers. It's the same conversation. You have so many third basemen. You have so many guys already on this current roster. They're number one prospects of third baseman, and it's not Curtis Mead. I was like, a guy like Curtis Mead, they can go get an arm. They can go get anybody they want for a guy like him. And so I'm sorry, I'm into the prospect.
Oh, no.
But I mean, I look at the Cubs and I'm like, do it. Marcus Stroman's like, I want to be the highest paid ever. Bye. I'm driving you to Tampa myself or St. Petersburg. See ya. Get in the car, bro.
Hey, trust me, I get where you're coming from because I mean, a lot of people were thinking that at the deadline. And I mean, to be honest, he hasn't been obviously because of injury. But it looks like it would have been fine. But we'll see. I mean, we mentioned how the fact that he might take that option up, and but I don't know. We'll see what happens. It's gonna be interesting, especially these last 10 days. Hopefully, in the next week, things look a little brighter for the Cubs. But I think that's a good place to wrap things up for this edition of the At Bat Podcast. I want to thank Gabriel Wilkins as well as Mike Hughes for his first time on the show. Like I said, we'll be seeing a lot more of his face throughout the season and off season as well. So thanks for coming on, man. I want to thank everyone for watching. Of course, check out Slam Society as well as all of the Bears coverage as well, the Bears Den pre and post game as well. I want to thank everyone for watching. For War Media, Saul Rodriguez. Everyone, have a great week.